The next one is actually the reversal of Trump's decision to remove the US from the World Health Organization.
Well, this same woman, let me just continue.
Go for it.
When she went to the doctor
Yeah.
and said, look, I'm traveling overseas, the doctor said, well, the World Health Organization recommends swine flu.
No.
So there you go. Now, just as a reminder for those who are late to the game, and no criticism, Dr. Tedros, head of the World Health Organization, was the number 3 man in a communist terrorist government running Ethiopia. He was responsible for covering up a cholera outbreak in Egypt. And this is the man that we trust. And even our foreign minister went to the trouble of defending the organisation by saying, oh, well, there might be some problems in the leadership, but by and large, they're telling us good things.
Oh, boy.
Moving right along.
Do not trust the WHO. You can trust them when they say things you like. For example, when they first came out and said lockdowns are good, now they're saying they're bad, it should be a last resort. I trust them. I trust them on that. Okay.
Well, if they're for the WHO, we're against it. Moving right along.
An executive order that creates the position of COVID-19 response coordinator and restores the Directorate for Global Health Security and Biodefense, a team in charge of pandemic response with the National Security Council. That's not much. Mike Pence was in charge of a similar thing before. It's just basically the COVID-19 task force. Nothing to see there. Calls to Congress to extend COVID-19 aid and requests to various departments to extend eviction and foreclosure moratoriums and pause payments for federal loans. So that's basically expansion of the debt, national debt. They want, I think it's $1,400 to go out to all Americans again, payments. And it's basically making sure people don't get kicked out. So, and this is the funny thing. They created the problem with the lockdowns, and then they're selling you the solution, and they're keeping the profits. This is what we're seeing, guys, and it's in real time. But I think that one's self-explanatory. This is one I want to get your word on. An instrument that will allow the US to rejoin the Paris Agreement on climate change within 30 days. Now, why would they do that, Riccardo, when China and India don't have to do anything till 2030, and they're the biggest emitters?
Again, I think we've covered it before, but it's a means by which they get money out of the average American and into other people's pockets. So they make money, but they also strip the average American citizen of their financial power, which they must do. And once again, if Biden's for it, any sensible person's got to be against it. And this tells you again the priorities. This is very bad news for the US.
Another one is an executive order reversing actions Trump took that Biden's agencies judged to have been harmful to the environment, public health, or the national interest, and asking agencies to revise these standards to tackle climate change. I think Trump did I think in his first 500 days, he ended up, for every one piece of legislation he put down, he repealed 23 of them. So he did a lot of deregulation, especially with climate stuff. So he got things through, which was good. I don't think this is great, but I won't elaborate on it too much. But deregulation has been largely really good for America. An executive order with the aim of embedding equity across federal policymaking and rooting out systemic racism and other barriers to opportunity from federal programs and institutions. This order will also disband the Trump administration's 1776 Commission, which is promoting American ideals in America's schools. What do you reckon about that one, Riccardo?
Internationalism. Internationalism. They're trying to solve problems that don't exist. There is no institutionalized racism. There might be personal racism, and that's a problem. Excuse me. That must be dealt with progressively in terms of what you call de-radicalization or just information. Yeah. But there are enough black people out there, big names and small names, saying this is nonsense. There is no institutionalized racism. There are individuals, but there is none.
That's right. Larry Elder, guys, check his conversation out with Dave Rubin. He smashes him when Dave was a progressive. But,
and so once again, if there's no problem and they're bringing a solution to it, there's another agenda, and the agenda is to undermine American values, what made America great. And once again, you've got to understand, why is everyone trying to get to the US? They're not beating a path to get to Pakistan. Yeah. They're not beating a path to Bangladesh. Yeah. Okay, so there's a reason, because the foundational elements of the United States as a nation are so attractive and so powerful and so wealth creating and so free that they need to rip that apart to destroy the country. And that's what this is all about.
Interesting. The next one's an executive order reversing a Trump administration order that excluded undocumented immigrants from the census. Interesting. Very interesting. So they're trying to include undocumented immigrants into the census now, which will, do you know what that'll do? That'll end up, for example, adding more Congress seats to certain states because the population goes up. Whereas if you take the census data before, and this just occurred to me, it would be less. For example, in California, so many people are moving out of California that they're going to lose 2 seats due to redistricting.
Where are they going?
Well,
Texas.
Texas is getting one.
There you go.
And this is the funny thing, guys. In most of these states, the Republicans are going to win they've got control over redistricting, which means that in 2022, in the midterm elections, we're going to see probably a red wave, even if Trump doesn't intervene at all, because their incredibly vulnerable seats are up for grabs. But that's just a little tidbit for you. The next is a memorandum directing officials to preserve and fortify the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, or DACA program. I think that's something to do with immigration. And kids coming from the southern border. Do you know anything else about that?
Oh, yeah. See, they were using the DACA program, which, again, they always give a program a name that sounds like it's a laudable objective. But the reality was it was being used by child traffickers to grab kids and walk across the border. So if this old man wanders across the border with a child, I'm his dad, I'm his dad. And they actually started doing the DNA tests. Oh. Have we covered this before?
Not really, no.
Again, just in case we haven't, or for those that are new to the program, what Trump introduced, and it came up through a piece of advice from somebody. Let's just leave it at that. And what they started doing, they started DNA testing, and they could get a turnaround within a few hours. And so child and man would come across, and they'd do a quick DNA test, no connection. And what he cut down on wasn't looking after the children and locking them up, because that's what Barack Obama and Joe Biden did as president and vice president. They were locking up kids, but they wanted the program in order to allow child trafficking to occur on a major scale. And I apologise, I can't remember the actual numbers, but the number of kids that were saved from being sex trafficked was huge, because they did this simple DNA test, result in a few hours on the ground. The old man went straight into jail. You're a sex trafficker. That's exactly what it was. And the kids could be looked after properly, rather than just funneling them through, waving them through. Yeah. And then the next thing, the old man gets and sometimes it's women, and sometimes it's families. So this isn't a male thing. They used anybody to get the kids in. But if there wasn't a DNA connection, they locked up the adults, and the kids get looked after, as opposed to under Biden when he was vice president, the child sex trafficking was huge. And so people are aware, sex trafficking is projected to overtake drugs and guns as the most profitable. Think about this for a bit. Most profitable earner for organised crime. And that's why Barry Soetto and his husband Michael were so keen on this whole thing.
Oh, that's shocking. That's actually shocking.
So this is, you really got to dive into this, guys.
Yeah, it's a big topic, and Trump did a phenomenal job with everything he did with that, like that and the wall. In fact, if for those of you who don't know, the reason why they take kids is not just for the trafficking trade, but it's also to get themselves in, because it's like a passport in a way. Because if it's just, a group of 50 men coming, then they're not going to let them in. It's going to be like 50 Syrian men rocking up to the UK. They're going to be like, no, you're not coming in. But if you've got kids with you, it complicates things. Kids
and the Middle Eastern example, it wasn't unusual for the men to dress up in a full burqa.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. It was just exactly what they used to do.
Wow.
And then they'd either kill the kids or sell the kids. They didn't matter. They just wanted to get across, and that's the way they did it.
Interesting. The next executive order is an executive action repealing 2 proclamations informally known as the Muslim ban that restricted entry into the US from major Muslim countries. Now, I'm so glad they brought this up, because the Muslim ban was actually, it stole some of the hard work from the Obama administration. The Obama administration came up with a list of like 19 or so Muslim countries that they deemed a threat, and probably action should be taken on to combat Islamic terrorism, radical Islamic terrorism. Well, Trump just grabbed the list and he said, okay, well, I'm going to keep progressing with this. And then they all, light their hair on fire and run around. It's like, what happened? This is Obama's work. I thought it was his economy, wasn't it? Well, this just like if it was Obama's economy, this is also his hard work. Trump just followed through with it. Now, Trump did later on reverse his stance on the Muslim ban, but that's beside the point. Did you want to say anything on this? Or?
Oh no, as you say, this is again the point here isn't necessarily the policy in and of itself. It's the fact that sociopaths will do something, and when you do it, they accuse you of doing wrong, and when they do it, it's okay. And you've just got to constantly pay attention because the lies come. There's a line out of Apocalypse Now. The bull dust, inverted commas, piled up so fast you needed wings to stay above it, and that's why people get confused. Oh no, this is black. Oh no, this is white. Oh no, this is black. Oh no, this is white.
Yeah.
And eventually just shake their head and they go back to watching My Kitchen Rules.
Yeah, that's why I get paid for what I do, guys. It's not fun to go through the bull dust.